Warren Littlefield, after everything that you have seen and done, how on earth did you end up producing two of the most acclaimed series on TV today, Handmaid's Tale and Fargo?
I've made a pact with the devil, and apparently that's working for me, Rob. Fargo was a project that I developed as a script that did not have the Coens involved when I was at NBC in the 90s. It was a year after the movie had come out, and I developed the script, and it was a pretty good script. And then I got to that moment where you had to decide, was I going to make it or not make it? And ultimately, my feeling was we shouldn't do a pale imitation at network television of an iconic film. And I passed. A year later, CBS made it as a pilot. Kathy Bates directed it. Edie Falco starred in it. I've never seen it. And it was a busted pilot that never went on the air. Through my development experience, I had a Fargo snow globe. And it was from the original film, and it made me laugh. I kind of loved it. So I kept it always in my office space. And I was looking at it 5.5 years ago. And I went, oh my God, Fargo, now it is time. It's a new world. Television has changed. And I had just done a short-lived show with Noah Hawley. And I said, here's what we ought to do next. And he said, I'm in. And our partners at MGM embraced us, and FX was absolutely the right place to be. And it was an incredible run. Most everyone that heard we were doing a television version of Fargo thought it was an awful, awful idea. And we just said, so watch it. Watch the pilot. At TCAs, they saw it and they went, holy shit. And it's been an incredible, remarkable, wonderful history. A cold one, but that's been a great tale. And
Handmaids as well.
Handmaids. I did not initially develop it, but my representation at WME said to me, do you know about this project? And I said, I don't. And they said, well, we think maybe you should read it. They're interested in Lizzie Moss, and quite honestly, we want protection if Lizzie's going to do it. Lizzie came to life, and she exploded in Mad Men. It was really West Wing where people started to fall in love with her. But you look at the people she got to work with on the West Wing, then in Mad Men, top of the lake, and they said, we're attracted to your credentials. You got to compete. Tell us if you're interested. And I read Bruce Miller's first 2 hours, and I knew about Margaret's book, but I hadn't read the book. And after reading Bruce's opening 2 hours, I said, this is incredible. This is remarkable. And then I sat down and pretty much in one sitting read Margaret's book. And then I went back and read Bruce's scripts again. And I called up WME and said, I have a lot of my own development I'm excited about. I'm slowly ramping up year 3 of Fargo. On a practical level, this makes no sense for me to get involved. But I love it. I love it. I think it's unbelievably compelling. I know the book is 32 years old, but it feels as relevant as it could possibly be. In a world where, and this was pre-Trump, but in a world where the alt-right was rising. And I said, I'm in. And before long, they said, Lizzie Moss is in Australia. She is doing Top of the Lake too. Here's a phone number, call her, get her to approve you, get her to put the hands of who directs it in your hands, not hers, and let us know how that works out. And I'm like, I've never even met Lizzie Moss. And they said, no, she's looking forward to meeting you by phone. So Lizzie and I had a 2-hour conversation, and we talked about choices. And I said, Lizzie, you've gotten to a point in your career where you have amazing choices. You get to do what you want to do, what you really believe in. If it's fair to say, I'm kind of in a good place in my career as well, where I get to make those choices. It's not practical for me to do this, but if you do it, I'll do it. And I promise I'll be there at 3 o'clock in the morning when you need me, when you're shooting at night and you're shivering cold, because I'm more hands-on than not. And she said, I think we have to do it. And that was it. I really, really bonded with Bruce and with Lizzie, and they're both in their own right extraordinary artists, and it's been an amazing journey doing The Handmaid's Tale.
We'll talk about Fargo a little later, but focusing on Handmaids, it's one of those projects, and it happens every once in a while, where everything just seems to come together unbelievably. So you talk about Bruce and obviously Elizabeth, your involvement. You've got Hulu behind you. They're obviously very keen to get their brand solidified and out there in the marketplace. And then the world changed in a very, very bleak and unusual way. Can you imagine that the show would have been that successful if real life hadn't started to really weirdly mirror perhaps what was going on the show?
I think that's a big factor. I think, first of all, Margaret's book has never been out of print. That's remarkable. 32 years, it's never gone out of print. Once the spots came on in the Super Bowl for Handmaid's Tale, that our Hulu partners generously stepped up and said, we're in, this is how much we're in. That propelled Margaret's book back to a bestseller, the top of the bestseller. It was #1 on Amazon within days after the Super Bowl. So I think that any time would have been a good time to adapt Margaret's book, that everything in that book comes from history at some point in history. And Margaret did a brilliant job of weaving that together through the character of Offred and her story of survival. And we really felt the pressure of, we better not screw this up. We better not let Margaret down. And then it was November. We were in the middle of production, and we woke up and Trump was president. And we all walked in onto set the next morning, pretty bleary-eyed, hadn't slept a lot, and I think the level of pressure became exponentially greater. And it had this bonding kind of sense to us. I mean, I think we were pretty well connected, and we're doing something rather extraordinary anyway. But I think we stepped up our game even more. And I think, as we've seen in the US and in the UK and throughout the globe, there is a rise of the right and the alt-right. And there is an ongoing battle for women's rights, whether it's here fighting for funding for Planned Parenthood. We very well may have to fight for Roe v. Wade. Just when you think you might be able to take a breath and say, look where we've gotten to, that we have equality for women, and that women's bodies are their own, that they're in control of these issues. Just when we might think that we've gotten to a plateau, we're knocked back down. And so it does feel today, in the world we are living in, more relevant than ever before. And I think first and foremost, we can't be another version of the news. I think we have to be a dramatic entertainment vehicle. We're a thriller. We're a dramatic thriller. But the fact that it is relevant seems to really add fuel to the fire that we have.
And then pivoting to Fargo, what's it into developing new season and the direction that it went in season 3? Where did it come from? Because it kind of didn't follow the obviously the first 2 seasons that closely. It's just and it's really worked in its own very fascinating way, don't you think?
Yeah. Again, we kind of stepped into something far more relevant than we ever imagined. And it started with Noah Hawley saying, I want to examine what the Coens had right up at the front of their film, and we have every week. This is a true story. And for Noah, that became an examination of truth. And the thematic for this year, starting with that opening in Berlin in the early 80s, is an interrogation scene. And we never go back to that, but it does state the thematic, and that is the truth is what we say it is. Now.
How timely is that?
Yeah. So lo and behold, we end up in a Trump world. We end up with an unbelievable dialogue each and every day with our government and the people of this land, feeling like we don't know what the truth is. The truth is, I'm holding this pen.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. Was that the truth? Was that not the truth?
Yeah.
And so we're in this fascinating dynamic, and then it all comes from character. And then we had the good fortune to reach out to Ewan McGregor and say, we'd like you to star in Fargo and play 2 leading characters. You'll be number 1 and number 2 on the call sheet. You'll be Emmett and Ray Stussy. And God bless him, Ewan said, I want to do this. And it only got better from there.
Yeah, absolutely. The casting for both series actually is so strong. Shows can live and die by their casting, as most people would know. Was there any particular challenges in either of the series in trying to get something particularly right that you or the team were worried about or concerned about, and you think you eventually pulled off?
Well, one of the interesting dynamics, in Handmaid's Tale, as I've said, we really try and honor Margaret Atwood's vision. And the first year stays fairly close to the book. But one of the issues we talked about is, in the book, written 32 years ago, it's a white world. And that minorities, we're told, are often the colonies. So they're not present in the book. And as we talked to Margaret about that, I think we ultimately felt we could do a show about racism. We didn't want to do a racist show. We try and it's an alternative world, but it's now. And yes, it's dystopian, but it's not apocalyptic. In fact, the world of Handmaid's Tale is New England in the fall. It's seductively beautiful.
Yeah.
Our visual imagery is a Vermeer painting. And so that is a pull you in, seduce you experience until you look closely at the world that you're in and you realize, no, in fact, it's really ugly. It's horrific. It just doesn't appear that way. And so what we wanted to say in reflecting the world that we live in today is what the alt-right and the far-right are doing is they're taking all people of all colors, and they want them to be a part of their movement. They want their movement to be as large and as inviting as it can be. And that, in fact, becomes a little more scary as well. So we adopted that. And we love the idea that Offred, when she's June, that the man she fell in love with happens to be Black. And they have a mixed race child, and that's the world we live in. And you know, in casting OT, the chemistry and the love, that just brilliantly worked with Lizzie. And so that was a big leap of honor Margaret's world or try and reflect the world more closely that we live in today. And we're quite happy with the results of that. And that also took us to Samira. And Samira Wiley, her Moira performance is brilliant and award-worthy. And you know, we feel quite good about that leap that we made and that departure from the book.
That's fascinating. You know, with Fargo, and Handmaid's Tale, you're working in a completely different environment than you did, you know, years ago when you were on network and you were running NBC. It's an obvious question, but how different is it now, and how much better is it for creative people to be working in this era of peak TV where you have so many platforms, Hulu and Netflix and Amazon and FX and HBO and Showtime? There's so much scope now, isn't there, for creativity? And isn't that, I guess, a good thing compared to what it used to be years ago?
Well, look, I was pretty proud of the content that we made at NBC. While I was running the network, we had 168 Emmy Awards. And I look back at some of those shows, and ER and Seinfeld and Frasier and Friends and Homicide, Life on the Street, and Law and Order. And, you know, we had a lot of award-winning television. I'm proud of that. But when I look at what's the best of what's out there in the marketplace today, it's grown incredibly. The complication in narrative, the complication of character is in an entirely new place. And I also think, as proud as we are of Fargo year one, we know that the bar keeps going up, and we scared ourselves with what we attempted to do in year two and what we attempted to do in year three because of our knowledge that the bar keeps rising. And we want to be as relevant, and we want to challenge ourselves. And I think all the artists that we bring together. So yeah, if your DVR is an insight into who you are, my DVR doesn't have a lot of network television. And I think we have remarkable content today. So to play in that, and also the process, there's such respect from the other side of the table, who we sit down with, and what they let us embrace. I wondered many times shooting The Handmaid's Tale, when were they going to say, you can't do this? You can't say it, you can't do it. And they never did. I mean, they leaped off of the edge of the cliff with us. And we were all really happy with the results, but they took the leap. You know, Reed Morano directs the first 3 hours of The Handmaid's Tale. Reed Morano, 3 weeks before I hired her, they wouldn't take a meeting with her at Fox Television because she didn't have the credentials to even get a meeting, despite the fact that Dan Fogelman wanted her for his pilot. She was the choice for pitch, and she couldn't get a meeting. And people did say, so Reed Morano, does she have a Oscar? No. She's an award-winning DP, but she has just started her directing career, but she's fearless. She has an incredible take on how to interpret this material. We think she's the right person for the job. And they backed it. They allowed us to hire her. And then I looked at the schedule and I went, I'm thinking it would be good to have her do the first 3 hours. Intelligently, the question was, if you've made a mistake, you will have killed the show. And I said, that's absolutely true. We will not recover if we're wrong in who's directing the first 3 hours. But if we're right, we will have cemented in a major way who we are, and any mistakes that we could possibly make going forward, we'll be able to compensate for, because we will have established so clearly who we are. And so I'm recommending we do that. And they said yes. So I applaud our partners. MGM and Hulu marched forward with us, making a lot of controversial decisions without fear.
Yeah, and you were obviously.
Look, it helps that I'm the experienced guy, that I'm the ex-network guy, and they'll listen to me. But I give them credit. That would just not be the case, as in the Reed Morano story for Pitch. It would not be the case if it were network television. I couldn't have gotten through the conversation. It would have been a non-starter.
Yeah.
But I think we are who we are because of our partners and who we're in business with.
Yeah. Do you think your background as an executive and all the experience that you've had, has that obviously enhanced your role as producer on both of these projects?
Yeah, I think so. I got Fargo because it was my idea to do it. It took a long time to put the rights and all of that together, and it was very important for us to get the Coen's blessing and for them to put their name on the show. Really, really important to us. And I think the kind of strategizing what could be, and then the execution of that took a few years to put together and get it done. I think all those network battles for all those years are probably some good skill sets. I also have a degree in psychology, Rob, so that may have helped as well, with all the things that you do in trying to put a team together and have them function at the highest possible level. And I think the gray allows me to make creative recommendations that people will give me the benefit of the doubt. And maybe sometimes I've earned that, maybe not. And then on Handmaids, Bruce Miller is a very experienced writer-producer, but he's never taken on anything as big as this. And Bruce really was in no way threatened, arms wide open, and embraced a partnership where we could build it together. And it's daunting to build an alternative world where as much as we wanted it to visually resemble the world that we live in, it's not. It's Gilead. It's a dystopia. And it is wonderfully framed from the point of view of Offred. So that allows us to slowly discover what that world looks like and feels like. But you're world building, and that's a big task. So I think I started as a producer. I grew up for 20 years as a network, at a network. I learned a lot, and I've learned exponentially more about the making of content since I left the network job. And I love being in the trenches. I love getting very dirty and very cold. And instead of juggling 100 balls, I juggle a dozen. But the quality of the creative experience is much, much deeper. And when people want to talk about the past, I'm happy to, because the present is so damn good.
Mm. Absolutely. Sorry, I'm just waiting for that delay. I don't know if you can hear that. It's gone now. So you think about what the past was like. Most of the really great stuff on TV was happening in network, 10, 15 years ago. That's where it was all happening. And then slowly it started to migrate over to other platforms, as we discussed earlier. The last Emmy-nominated drama series was The Good Wife in 2011. It was a long time ago. Like, it just seems to be now that the industry is really focusing more on streaming and cable and so forth. And you've obviously left network TV behind, and you seem quite firmly entrenched in that new format and this new world. I'm wondering if you think that the signs seem to be showing us that the 22-episode format, the network format, is slowly dying, or maybe might become extinct. What do you think about that?
I think making 22 episodes of extraordinary television is more and more impossible to do. The demands of production, the complexity of storytelling. I take my hat off to the producers and showrunners who are still able to do that. I think This Is Us, Danny Fogelman's NBC hit, did 17 hours and nearly killed them. And it's outstanding television, and that's kind of the hope and that's keeping the torch alive for the network side. Artists in front of the camera, behind the camera, really seem to embrace, let's make 10 hours. Year 2 of Handmaids will be 13. We love that. Let's do 10 to 13 hours of something extraordinary. Let's throw all the rules out the window, and let's do something that is extremely complex in its narrative drive and in its character exploration. And that takes, honestly, a lot more time for writers to plot and plan. Year 1 of Fargo, Noah had 8 of the 10 scripts written before we went into production. Year 2, we had probably 6 or 7 written. Year 3, we had at least half of them written. You have a tremendous leg up for every single department head, everyone to know where we're going. You can just make it better that way. So I think that is very much the future, and networks are adapting. They have to, and they need to have more flexibility if they want to continue to be in the game, but the game has shifted. We are not going to back away from living in a world where there's over 400 scripted series per year. There may be fewer platforms. There are many, many platforms. They may not all survive, but we're in an age of choice, kind of this platinum age of choice for viewers. And I don't see any end to that, which is wonderful.
Yeah, it is wonderful. Speaking of Emmys, let's talk about the Emmy for season 1. That would have been so exciting and vindicating. I don't know. Tell us how you felt about the win for Fargo in season 1 of the Emmys.
There was this magical. We went from why would you do that to oh my God, this is incredible. And I think in addition to the insane casting and Noah's brilliant material, we were able to strike a tone that is just not out there in the world. wonderfully dark and deliciously funny, and there's just not many people are able to navigate that. Even when you sit in a movie theater and a film aspires to be that, it's not often that they thread that needle and hit it. And we just had this charmed post year one award season magic. We were the ones. I could tilt the camera if you want. There is a table with a lot of awards on it. Shall I do that?
Yeah, I think you should. No.
Okay. I'll put my snow globe back. But yeah, so it was kind of magical and wonderful. And you don't assume anything because 18 nominations, year one and year two for Fargo were pretty phenomenal. But when you get to that, get a statue, every single nominated show is exceptional. But somehow we managed to be winners. And the audience loved us, the critics loved us. The only proper response was, let's keep doing it.
Yeah. And you are. So that's, we'll see what else we've got in store from the coldness of Minnesota, South Dakota, and wherever else this show is being set now. I've got one final question. This is really hard for me. Yeah, exactly. I know. Like anywhere cold, it seems. I don't know why you're so attracted to the cold, but anyway, that's a whole other discussion.
It's a character, right, Rob? It's a character.
It is a character.
And, I've lived in Southern California for decades, so I needed a new wardrobe. Shopping is fun.
That's a very good excuse. So much has been said about your past or your legacy. You wrote a really great book, Top of the Rock, and there's been TV movies made about certain aspects in late night. And if people aren't aware, you fostered legendary classics like Seinfeld and Law and Order and Frasier and Friends and ER and Will and Grace and all those must-see TV. That's all Warren Littlefield, everybody. And I think we have a lot to owe to someone like you. And I'm wondering, when you think back on those really cold nights and you're just thinking back to your legacy and your past, is there anything in particular that you're most proud of and how you've impacted television and even popular culture at large?
I was a kid when I started at NBC, and I loved the medium. I was proud to be working in it, but I was a little bit of an open vessel. And I'm so thankful and grateful that there was someone like Grant Tinker who looked at the youth that was in that building and inspired us with first be best, then be first. And kind of a mantra of respect the audience. The audience are not aliens that you have to go through ridiculous twists and turns to try and figure out what they want. The audience is you. That's who we want. You love the medium. You're bright. You're talented. You seek television that you want to race home and see. Make that. Do the things that make you race to the set. And it was incredible advice. And then I had a mentor in Brandon Tartikoff. And so what an education that was for me. And so I've tried to honor that past. And yes, we had to reinvent the network in the 90s because we had gotten old and stale. I love that challenge. I guess that's like the sports guy in me. I loved the challenge of most people thought we were dead and I couldn't follow in Brandon's shoes. And so it was great to surprise people. And we bet on the intelligence of the audience. We bet that the audience was ready for Will and Grace, even though my management said the advertisers will kill you. Well, they didn't. They actually embraced it. They saw it as a wonderful character comedy. And I saw the network as a place where it should be the home for content that reflected the world we lived in. So those were the instincts I followed, and I loved those years. I loved everything that we got to do. And now I'm just doing a much deeper, more intense, more closely associated with the creation of that content. Instead of supervising it as a suit, I'm making it in a winter suit. And I love it. There's no reason to sleep. It's too much fun.
It is a lot of fun, and God knows what else you're going to come up with in the next few years. We're really looking forward to that. And good luck at the Emmys. Congratulations on The Handmaid's Tale and Fargo. They're both beloved and acclaimed by all.
Thank you, Rob.